You are listening to the Slow Living Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie O'Day. What if I told you that you could truly have the life of your dreams, the life you've always wanted, one filled with abundance, joy, and a sense of purpose? It's absolutely possible, and I see it each and every day with my coaching clients. It all starts with learning how to slow down. You deserve to live the life you've always dreamt about. Let's get started. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you're going to absolutely love the book. Slow Living, Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World is now available wherever books are sold. Buy it for yourself, your children, your friends, and your neighbors. You can get all the juicy details at stephanieoday.com/slow living book. Trust me, this is hands down the best $20 you'll ever spend. Hi there, Slow Down Society. Steph here, and we are on episode 160 of the Slow Living Podcast. And I am thrilled because I am here with Stephanie Marie Seferian, and she is an author and a podcaster, former journalist, and mom of two girls. She studied journalism in college and spent many years working for her community newspaper. But it wasn't until she began teaching high school literature she leaned into her passion for writing. Fast forward a decade and two kids, and in an effort to marry her passions for eco-friendliness and writing, Stephanie started a blog and then later a podcast. She is the author of Sustainable Minimalism, and you can find that wherever books are sold. Stephanie believes in incremental minimalism, and that's the key to saving our planet. As such, she offers actionable content on all of her platforms, and it inspires listeners and readers to incorporate slow but steady tweaks. She offers actionable content on her platforms that inspires listeners and readers to incorporate slow but steady tweaks towards sustainability in their daily lives. Her podcast, The Sustainable Minimalists, focuses on demystifying eco-minimalism with kids, including ethical decluttering practices, conscious consumerism, and low-waste living. Stephanie lives in Boston with her two daughters, a yellow lab, and a hive of 10,000 honeybees. So we're going to have to talk about that. And a husband who loves to compost almost as much as she does. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being here. And I just can't wait to dive into your story and about the bees. That's okay. I need more about that.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's always exciting to have Stephanie on the show because I don't know, do you get as excited as I do to see your name in your inbox?
Yeah, I must say I'm not one of those women who hates their name. I love my name. I think it's the best name ever. Good job to my mom for picking it. Yeah, so if Stephanie's the best name, Stephanie's are the best people. So happy to be here with you, another Stephanie.
I think so. So I've shared, I think I've shared with you when we chatted earlier. I'm a huge acronym junkie, but then also the syllables, the 3 syllables of Stephanie. For a while, I was like really focused on sounding out syllables and playing with my fingers and syllables. So I appreciate the 3 syllables in Stephanie.
Did you get step on me growing up at all?
No. Maybe that's an East Coast thing. Interesting.
Yeah, like a little bullying here or there, step on me, but it's all good.
Yeah. So we have a lot in common. I too wrote for our local newspaper for a while. I had a column called Steph and Sensibility. I studied English literature, and I thought I was going to teach high school English, but then I had kids and life took on, well, a life of its own. So how did you get started? What is your backstory outside of your bio?
Well, I'll say Steph and Sensibility is a great column name. I had a column in my college paper titled Steph in the City because I went to school in New York City. So we have a lot in common with our little name puns. But I guess my story is I worked at my community newspaper for a while and decided to pivot. And I pivoted into teaching. I taught high school English for, I believe, 9-10 years, which I enjoyed, but I knew once the children were coming along, it was going to go. I had always wanted to be home with my children and talking about slow living. I wanted to be fully present for them. My mother well, I should say my parents were divorced and my mom worked two jobs to make ends meet. And so if the stars aligned and it was possible, I knew I wanted to be home with my children. However, when the children came and I had no job, I realized that, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I really needed an outlet, creative outlet. I needed something to do that exercised my brain in ways that didn't include making dinner and, cleaning up the house. I also, around that time when my first daughter was born, started to think real seriously about the state of our planet and whether there would be a planet that was habitable for my children. I didn't really care so much about environmental issues until I became a mother, but a switch went off. And around that same time also, so it was like a perfect storm of all these things happening, was just the sheer amount of stuff that my new daughter had. She's an infant and she had a better wardrobe than I did. She had more toys to occupy her than I could ever imagine. A lot of well-meaning family members gave so much. But what I noticed happening was that I did not have a lot of free time as a new mom. I thought it was going to be this idyllic existence, but I was stressed, overwhelmed. I did not know how to take care of a newborn. And this free time that I did have was spent organizing, taking care of, finding places to store all of the baby stuff. So I went down a decluttering journey, but my decluttering journey very soon collided with my newfound environmental values. Like, I did not want to just throw out perfectly decent stuff. I decided and realized for myself that it wasn't about decluttering and then recluttering my space with more stuff that we didn't need. It was more about getting to the root of why I continued to allow so much stuff into my space and stopping that, like, at the beginning, before the stuff enters the home. And that's really how sustainable minimalism was born. It's about desiring less, buying less, owning less for the planet, for our well-being. Sure, like, my house is not as big of a mess as it once was, but also for the planet, because overconsumption is a major source of our environmental woes. So I started a blog. I'll finish up my story. This is a really long story, but I started a blog. No one read it. It was just my mom and my sister. And around that time, podcasts were new and interesting. So I started a podcast, and the podcast really took off. So that's why I'm here.
I'm glad you're here. I really am very glad you're here. And you touched upon a bunch of different topics, and I was feverishly taking notes. And if you're okay, I'd like to unpack them a little bit. And it's interesting. So your journey and who you are and what you write and speak about is a lot of the listeners to this podcast, the Slow Living podcast, wish they could do some of the things that you did. And something is holding them back. And one thing you said really jumped out at me is you said you wanted to desire less. And that's really tricky. And especially if you went to school and you went to college, but you have this kind of like inkling, like, I just want to stay home. I think that's what's actually right for my family, for my needs, for my kids and my future kids. How do you kind of stop with that questioning of, when am I throwing away my degree? Am I throwing away my education? Is this the right thing? We do live in this kind of consumer-driven capitalistic society that if you're not going to Disney every year, you're doing it wrong, and that kind of stuff. So was it a difficult decision to stay home? Did you try and like garner a certain amount of money in order to do so, or was it a leap of faith?
I would say on the financial end, it was, my husband and I had conversations ahead of time. We knew that if we went down to one income, our lifestyle would have to change. It just would. We don't have money growing on trees in our backyard. We don't have a windfall coming in from some unnamed source. And so we knew our lifestyle would have to pare down. I mean, when we were dual income, no kids, when we were dinks, I love that acronym. Um, we were going out to dinner every weekend at least once, and that had to change. So did the mindless buying of stuff. When I was a teacher, I would walk the mall and buy new outfits to look professional. From a financial side, that had to stop, but also from a practical side, I no longer needed a professional wardrobe as a stay-at-home mom. So things definitely shifted. And I will say that in those early days, everything in my life was shifting, like not just not having a job anymore, but also trying to care for an infant. It was chaos in my life at that point. So I guess the financial issues took the backseat to getting through the day and navigating this new role as a mother, as a caretaker. I would say in those early days, that was definitely where the stress lie, the heaviest amount of stress lay in becoming a caretaker full time.
So was it kind of like a light switch? Like, okay, this is my new identity, and I'm going to step into this new role and identity, and I don't need to shop for fun, and I don't need to do this anymore? Or was it kind of a gradual thing? And did you ever go through a mourning period?
I wouldn't say there's been a mourning period, but I would say that it is gradual. I'm not, I'm still growing and evolving and moving towards who I think I am at my core. Like I'm not there yet, let's say. Um, but no mourning period. I will just say that once I started my minimalism journey and I started looking critically at my stuff, like I started decluttering my daughter's things first because she was a baby and she couldn't protest. I remember making a pile on my floor of all the stuff that she had that she didn't use, didn't need, didn't love, just was extra and frivolous. And then after I had her stuff in a pile, I went around my house and I did the same with my stuff. Like, why do I have 6 spatulas, for instance? So like, why do I have 2 drawers full of mugs? Just the process of going through my stuff wasn't just about decluttering for me. It was an opportunity for me to look deeply and take a good hard look at my consumption habits, but also the stuff that's marketed to us that we don't need. And if we have that aha moment, I call it my come to Jesus moment of, oh my goodness, when I buy this stuff, it's not benefiting me. It's padding the pockets of, you know, stakeholders in some corporation, but this stuff is not benefiting me. For me, it became very easy to turn away from, the overconsumptive life and by consequence, save the money that I was no longer making because I didn't have a job.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We're in this funny society right now in that it's sort of as if others are deeming you worthy or unworthy depending on like your job title or the amount of money you make. Um, I actually kind of think it's gross. And so we probably actually have the same gut reaction to that. But it, do you ever feel uncomfortable? Like if you're meeting someone for the first time at a party or if you're going to an event for your husband's work, do you ever struggle with how you identify yourself and what you say you do?
I completely struggle. This is probably my biggest area of interpersonal struggle at the moment. I live in a community that is, I'm trying to think of the right word. Like people follow the formula. The formula is go like live in a great neighborhood with great school districts, go to a great college, get a great job, rise your corporate ladder, get a great title, and then repeat. Like that's the formula. And I would say the majority of people in my community, and my community is lovely, by the way, I'm not bashing it by any means, but the majority of people in my community follow the formula. And as somebody who's doing things differently, it can be difficult for me to present confidently, I would say. Going to a dinner party and hearing everybody rattle off their amazing titles and accolades. And then they say, what do you do? And I'm like, I host a podcast. Um, it, I don't know if anybody
Okay.
else is judging me, and I don't necessarily think they are, but I kind of do feel less than.
So it is a very successful podcast, and you do have a book. So you totally could say that you're an author and a podcaster, but does that feel phony? Because then, I mean, you are bringing in an income. So it's interesting though, because for some reason, like your salary equals worthiness. The higher your salary, the more you're worth to society, which kind of feeds this machine of then you can
Mhm.
buy more and then blah, blah, blah. But you're absolutely right. It's one, destroying the planet. And two, it's modeling this really like consumer driven culture to children that I'm interested in shifting up. And I know you are also. Um, yeah. So you touched on confidence, and it's funny because here we are talking across the interwebs on a podcast, and you have one, and both of us can reach quite a few people, and yet confidence is what both of us probably would highlight that we struggle a tiny bit with.
Yes, I like to think of it in terms of like my external world and my inner world. So I know that being home with my children is like where my heart lies. That's where my inner compass is telling me to focus my time. Not necessarily the same for everyone, but I know in my gut that's where I want and need to be. That's where my efforts are best used. I also know that my podcast, I'm talking about on my show and in my book, like heart first things. It's my passion, right? Like I'm sure your platform is likely your passion as well. The problem comes when I take what feels right in here in myself, in my inner world, and I try and fit this round peg into a square hole, which is, the external world. Going against the grain, doing things differently, not following the formula, um, does make me feel off my game, or to use the word confident, less than confident sometimes, especially around people I don't know very well. But I always do. I'm in the practice, and um, it does help to just go back inside and just recenter myself around, okay, what I'm doing is right for me. It might be different. I might not be on the bandwagon with everybody else, but I think that's a tenet of slow living, right? Like centering yourself around what's right for you, not what's right for everybody else, but for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The acronym I like to use for slow is to simply look only within. And you're absolutely right. We're sort of bred in this like seeking approval from others mindset. Like we want the gold stars, we want the A's, we want the to-do list so then we can check off. Yet my like largest driver in life is to have less stuff on that to-do list and less things that I need to dust and clean and organize and wash and sort through. Um, and it's very tricky. So if you're listening to this and you think we have it all figured out, no. Part of humaning is constant growth and learning and evolving and pivoting. And as Stephanie said, when your inner compass is pointed towards something you know deep down inside is correct for you and your family, you can't go wrong. Even if the Joneses down the street don't get it, let them not get it. Let them not get it. That's up to them to figure out their own journey, and you do you. So we're heading into the holidays, and we're heading into uh, the biggest consumption part of the year, where our kids are advertised to nonstop. What do we do? How do we tell people, no, please don't buy me this crap plastic stuff?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, Stephanie, but I just wanted to say while you were talking, I was thinking about another part of the interpersonal um, conundrum that
Yes.
I face. I just wanted to add to that, and then we'll go to, the holidays. But I often also find that now that I don't have a traditional title, like now that I can no longer say, oh, I'm a journalist or oh, I'm a teacher, people don't ask me about myself as much anymore. Extended family, acquaintance, friends, like I feel like if I'm not following the traditional route, it's easy to say like, oh, how's work? How's teaching? How are your students this year? But because what I do is unconventional, I also pick up on sort of like a reluctance or a reticence for people to ask about what it is I do. And I don't know if this is um like a sexist thing. Like, are women generally not asked about themselves? I don't know if it's a stay-at-home thing, but I do find that nobody ever asks about me. So I just say putting that out there for anybody who also feels the same. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're gonna end up having a coaching session. Because now my eyes are actually welling with tears, because you kind of poked at a very vulnerable spot for me. I was home for 12 years with my kids. Um, and I wouldn't change any of it. But you're absolutely right. Even people in my own family and extended family just kind of quickly would dismiss. It didn't matter if I had a new book coming out, because they can't relate to it. And they all just sort of assumed that it was like a hobby. There were times where I was making more money actually than my husband. But because they couldn't relate, um, they couldn't figure it out. So now I work in a school district, um, and yes, there's money coming in and some benefits, and it's steady. Yet the writing and the different things I do at times brings in a lot more money than that. But that's nobody can relate. And I'm not the kind of person who's going to brag about finances. I'm just not. But that feeling of sitting on the couch when everyone is sharing what they do at work, and I'm sitting here with a bubble in my mouth, not knowing how to interject, because one, I don't want to be show offy that, oh, I was just on this top 0.225% podcast. That means nothing to other people, even though it's kind of actually a great big huge deal. And I know you know this. It's very tricky. And I do think you are right that it is sexist and misogynistic in many ways, because it's just easier to label a person as their profession or as their career. Like, oh, you're a teacher. Great. Got it. Okay, moving on. Like, oh, okay. Boy, those kids, they must be really hard to deal with, and blah, blah, blah. Yet for you as a stay-at-home mom, uh, and me as a stay-at-home mom, many times we would have such like huge triumphant breakthroughs in our own lives or with our own kids that we just perfected this something, or moved up to the next reading level, or organized something. So I don't know what I'm saying, but one, completely and totally agree with you, and I wish I could hug you through Zoom.
I'm hugging you. Oh, can I just say one more thing on that too? Is I'm thinking about like gatherings. People will ask me about my children as though I'm an extension of their children, but they won't ask about me and my life and how I'm doing and what I'm doing professionally. And just like you, I'm not going to brag. I'm not going to say, oh, everybody, guess what? I just, was the guest on this, or oh, I was just the keynote speaker on that. And I wonder, I feel as though in our society, like we label a person by their profession, but also we compare ourselves based on other people's profession. So like we size them up almost. I'm like, okay, a teacher has, this makes this amount of money. They're here in society, let's say. And this is all, implicit, maybe even unconscious for a lot of us. But then when we're talking about entrepreneurs, basically, because that's what you and I are at the end of the day, it's not just a podcast, it's not just a new book. We're entrepreneurs, we're building a platform, building a brand. There comes a line that we can unintentionally cross with other people in which, oh, they're that successful. Oh, I don't want to say offended by that, or
so that's successful, and also get to spend time with our kids. God almighty, I know the ins and outs of all of the stuff, all of the friend drama, all of the things, as do you. And that's priceless.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. And with the entrepreneur, like, okay, if a code goes broken on the site, I know some like very rudimentary HTML. I know how to do, it's so funny the other day at work, and I think it's great. But I'm a school site secretary. So at times I'm just sort of patted on the head as the stupid secretary. And it's fine. I am A-okay with it. I don't have homework. I get my summers off. I have a very charmed life. But this teacher was like, oh, did you know that in this email that if you highlight this, you could insert a hyperlink? And I'm thinking, OMG, I have built so many websites. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for the hot tip.
Okay, that was super snarky. Sorry. Yeah. But as you know, if you run a robust newsletter, there are times to use a hyperlink, and then there are times to actually have the whole link, because not everyone understands that the highlighted and underlined thing, like I want a 1% click-through rate, so I know exactly what I'm doing all the time. So there you go.
Nice.
Yeah, we could geek out forever. Okay, so talk to me in very practical. How do you get grandma to stop buying cheap plastic stuff? Or do you?
Okay, well, I've had some success with this over the years. I will say, for anybody listening who has not broached this topic ever with the grandmas, it's a gradual process. You're not gonna get it right this holiday season. It's taken years, as somebody who hosts the Sustainable Minimalist podcast, to get the grandparents on board with buying less plastic. So it takes years, and it takes consistency. So you can't ask, to change things up one year and then go back to the way things have done the next year. No, the people in our lives like consistency. So my top choice for other people's buying is to make a list, and make it like in September, make it last month. Have a detailed list of what your children need, and ask the grandparents for needs. If there's no list, it's free for all. Especially grandparents, they love to overbuy. It's like the number one way that grandparents show that they love their grandchildren. And I hear that, right? But if we want them to show love but not go overboard, I always suggest giving them a list way before they even ask for it. I also suggest, so my mother does a great thing. For me, with my own children, we do the 5 gift rule. So it's a reading gift, something to read, something to wear, something they need, an experience gift, and then I add in the 5th one, which is something to share. It's usually like a set of Legos or something that or a family game, something we can all do together. My mother, and then again, this was gradual. When my children were younger, she bought all the things. But over time, she's realized that they have way too much. They don't need more. They don't appreciate more because they already have more than they could ever, they have more than that could excite them. It's too much. So she's gradually come to the realization that paring down the amount of gifts that she gives my children, her grandchildren, is best for her wallet, and it's best for my home, and it's best for the children. So she buys them 1 book, 1 outfit, and 1 toy. That's it. That's all they get from her for Christmas. And I'll just say this too, she takes them to the stores and they pick out what they want. So I'm not sure if there's any tips there other than to say, don't think you're going to change gifting habits of other people overnight. That's not how it's going to work. It's a gradual process. Give them a list. I also have heard the tip, which works for some people. Don't give the grandparents a list of don'ts. Don't say, don't buy plastic, don't buy this, don't buy that. Instead, frame it in the other way. So say, I really want to give my children a childhood of experiences. I want to give them a childhood that does not, if environmentalism matters to you, that does not harm the planet. We already have so many plastic toys. If you choose to buy toys, they would love, and then insert. So instead of doing it on the negative, like don't, twist it to the positive. They love experiences, blah, blah, blah. Tickets to the Science Museum. My mother-in-law got my kids that to the Boston Science Museum memberships. Oh my gosh, the best gift ever for everybody. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's true. We other things that I've seen work are like a ticket master thing. So like when Disney on Ice comes through or the circus comes through, then you have like ticket master money and things like that. And it's tricky because grandparents especially like to see the pile of presents. I think many boomers grew up with like kind of Great Depression parents. So it feels bountiful and it feels nice and it feels luxurious to have lots of things to unwrap. And depending on the age and the stage of your kids, I mean, you can unwrap a whole bunch of things just because things are fun to unwrap. I saw on your website that you like to reuse wrapping paper and tissue paper and things like that.
Oh yeah. Well, the wrapping paper's hit or miss depending on if it's, torn off. I'm not going to tape back together wrapping paper, but
Yeah.
bows, ribbon, tissue paper, that can all be flattened out and used again. I know what you mean about like the gorgeous sight of perfectly wrapped with, perfect creased, corner gifts under the tree. And I get that. But I do think that we can, put a little pragmatism into our gift giving and still have the festivities, still have the fun. I think with a little bit of intention, we can still celebrate. We just
Yeah.
don't have to be as wasteful.
I like that. I also like the idea of not going in with a whole bunch of don'ts. Because people feel attacked and they feel prickly and start to get defensive. And there's kind of a divide that, well, I don't know how much it is in real life as much as it's being played out on the internet of the generations not speaking the same language. And if you have family and their love language is gifts and yours is not, meet them in the middle and try not to make anyone think that the way they are is wrong. It's just different. Tastes change, people change, ideas change. We're a lot more of a green generation than previous generations are. And it takes a while for the brain to catch up to that sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Stephanie, is there so is there if we never talked about the bees. I want to make sure we talk about the bees. Wait, where are they? And how do you keep them away from your kids?
Oh, they're in the yard.
Okay.
We have 2 bee boxes. I will be transparent and say that the bees are my husband's duty. One year for Christmas, my husband, I didn't know what to get my husband, as a gift. And we had been talking that year about how we, wanted some more hobbies. So I just bought him a bee box and I signed him up for a continuing ed adult continuing ed class at my local high school. They had an evening class on how to keep bees. That was a couple of years ago now. He's the best beekeeper. I don't actively keep them away from my children. I will say that they are, in the kind of wild area in my yard. But they do fly around. They do, occasionally sting. They usually sting
Mhm.
my husband because he's up in there. I have had my neighbor complain about the bees in her yard, but Pollinators are really important. We get at least 30 pounds of honey every September.
Wow.
Um, and it's a great hobby. My kids are like so into not necessarily taking care of the bees, but eating the honey. So I'm all for it. My neighbor can continue to complain if she'd like.
That's funny. That's funny. Oh, so actually, I wanted to talk about that and the donate. There's two other things I wanted to make sure. If are you stuck on time? Are you okay on time? Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. So one thing, the 30 pounds of honey, are you trying to sell it and create an income for that or not at all?
No, we probably could if we printed out a label and, did all the things, but I have nieces and nephews who eat honey like it's going out of style. We just give it to them. I give it to my mom, my in-laws. And in our house, actually, we use honey, like if we're making pancakes or waffles, we use honey instead of maple syrup because maple syrup's really expensive and the honey we have is free.
Yeah.
So we just keep it and enjoy it.
I like that. And then when you had spoken earlier about your first foray into decluttering and you had all of these things that you were giving to Goodwill and that kind of stuff, some people try and sell like on eBay or Poshmark or things like that. Did you ever do any of that?
I do and have. I feel as though there's a monetary threshold for me, for everybody, but for me especially in order to sell. I feel like selling is a lot of times more work. There's a lot of inquiries, a lot of people don't show up, then they want to haggle on price. So for people who, want to sell stuff, I suggest you have a financial number. Like if you could make $50, that might be your threshold. If it's worth less than $50, maybe it's not worth your time because your time is worth something, right? So yes, I do sell sometimes Facebook Marketplace. That's usually my go-to. But through experience, I know that selling comes with extra hassle. So I have to be making enough money to make it worth my time.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was when we had talked about like the saving the bows and the saving things. Teachers in general, I want to use the word hoard, which might not be the correct word, but it's tricky. So if you're trying to reuse and reduce and recycle and be minimalist, sometimes there's a really big divide. So like I'll go into the workroom at work and it's like there's like bins of, honestly, it's crap that I would be okay with just getting rid of and starting fresh. But how do you kind of become minimal if you also have the mindset of, oh, well, this orange juice lid might one day make a great craft?
Yes. Okay, so this is such a good question, and you're hitting on the tension between sustainability and minimalism, right? Like somebody who's sustainable focused, I'll say that again. Somebody who's like environmentally focused, they're going to save everything because they don't want it going to the landfill. But the minimalist is going to declutter everything that they don't need now or in the foreseeable future. Again, everybody has their own threshold, but for me, I abide by physical boundaries. So let's take the gift wrap and tissue paper and ribbons example. I have where I keep that stuff, it's in the guest room closet. I have two plastic bins. I think they're called bins. Tupperware, they're not Tupperware, but you know what I mean, the plastic Rubbermaid bins. Once those are full, I'm not saving any more stuff. Because that's plenty, right? The physical barrier is full. The physical boundary is full. So then I let things go. I do this with everything. Christmas decorations. We have 3 bins. I'm not under any circumstances going to buy a 4th bin for Christmas decorations. So if I see something I really need to have, or like just the other day, my mom said she wanted to give me her nativity set. If it's not going to fit in the bins, I either have to decline bringing that new thing into my home or get rid of something that's already in the bin. This physical boundaries example tends to work almost always for me. Like if the boundary's full, then I'm no longer saving.
Love it. Love it. That's very practical. And yeah, same here. I don't want more. bins. Yeah. We now have Halloween bins also because decorating for Halloween has turned into a thing. And I actually really like the lights. Um, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So,
Can I just
okay.
say something?
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to
Yeah.
say one more thing on that. I've found that, and this was with kids' clothes. So, I love a good secondhand kids' clothes. Like, bring it to me, bring all of it to me. But what happens if you're saving more than you have room for is you start like, or at least I start squirreling it here, there, and everywhere. And the problem with squirreling stuff everywhere is that when it came time for my children to wear, the size 6X clothes, let's say, I forgot where I put him. I forgot I even had him. So, like, the keeping of stuff for environmental reasons is certainly important, but only if you have a system in place and know exactly where they are so that when the time comes to use those clothes or to use that bottle cap or whatever it is, you actually know that you have it. So
Yeah.
that's why I like containers.
No, agree. And I think probably many of us are guilty in that we forgot where we hid this year's Christmas presents or something, and you end up buying again. And it's one, embarrassing, and two, terribly, terribly wasteful. So yeah. Stephanie, thank you so much for spending so much time with us. Where can people find you? We will link to everything.
I spend the most amount of my time on Instagram. You can find me there at Sustainable Minimalists. Also, if you love a good podcast, come on over, check mine out. It's called Sustainable Minimalists, and you can find it anywhere podcasts are. And thank you so much, Stephanie. I had a really great time. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Slow Down Society. I appreciate you being here with us. We think you are amazing and wonderful and lovely. And I'll be in your earbuds again next week. Do you have a slow living story to share? Leave me a voicemail at stephanieodea.com/podcast with any questions, comments, feedback, or testimonials, and I will be sure to include it in an upcoming episode. Also, if you found value in this episode, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. The more you share, comment, and leave positive reviews, the more people we can reach and share the slow living lifestyle and messaging. Thank you, Slow Down Society, and have an absolutely wonderful day.